to acknowledge the resilience and bravery of Iranian women, both in Australia and overseas. I know that many have endured war and political repression and displacement, and have had to rebuild your lives in a new country, and the strength and sacrifice and leadership required for that is really inspiring. Iranian Australian women make a huge contribution to our local community in terms of business and the arts, and leading our community organisations, and important insights into conversations about multicultural communities and social cohesion and women's rights. I'm no expert on Iranian history or Iranian feminism, but being a representative of a large Iranian community is something I take seriously. So doing my best to educate myself in those areas, but I'm also very much here to listen and learn today, and I'm grateful for the opportunity for that as well.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Senator McDonald?
Good morning. Can I just check you can hear me?
Yes.
Terrific, thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation to share International Women's Day with you all today. I acknowledge all the other panellists, but of course, mostly I acknowledge Iranian women who are thinking of their families who are still in Iran or other places of conflict, and those of us who are lucky enough to be here in Australia and in the society that we have. I celebrated International Women's Day yesterday with a big group of North Queensland people in Townsville, and Gabriel, I was able to send the men a message that as men who love women, you're all most welcome to celebrate International Women's Day. But more seriously, it is the shared experiences of women, that solidarity of the differences that we celebrate of women, of our caring and nurturing roles, of the physical gift of giving birth and raising our children, but also being leaders in our societies that bring a different approach of collaboration. And I think for all of those reasons, today is a great day to celebrate. And I'm, really delighted to be here with you all, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our panelists. So before we start, I will give a little bit of context about how is the situation of women inside Iran, how it has been through the last 4 decades. And then we will get to our roles as women and as a democratic country here, how to support them and what we can do in order to make sure that they will get what they want when they are asking for. So since 1979, when the Islamic Revolution happened in Iran, the Islamic Republic regime came into the power. The first thing this regime did was to strip women from all their rights and limited their participation in public life and even in public spaces. So since 1979, women had to cover themselves. They are limited in the amount, the number of the types of the jobs that they can get in Iran. They are limited in the types of education that they can get. And based on the laws that exist right now, which is the law of the regime, the Islamic Republic regime, women are being treated not as a full citizen. They are being treated as half human. And that is literal because, for example, if there is a case that someone needs to go to a court in Iran and provide a witnessing to the court, a woman's witnessing will be counted as half value of a man. So 1 witness from a man would equal to 2 witnesses from 2 Iranian women. And again, these are the same rule when we go to inheritance or any other types of, legal rights that must be taken into consideration through the law. Apart from that, on every single aspect of life, even the most personal ones, Iranian women are being controlled, surveilled, and punished if not follow the rule. For example, girls are not allowed to have boyfriends. women are banned from singing or dancing in public. And their engagement in society in general is very limited. Still, the courage and bravery of Iranian women resist all these barriers that exist around them. That's why you see videos of Iranian women walking down the streets with no hijab. That is the resistance that they are showing. Consider the fact that they know very well that for doing so, they may get punished, they may put in prison, and they might be even killed, like what happened to Mahsa Jina Amini in 2022, and sparked the Woman Life Freedom movement in Iran, which was very well received by women even up to date, and gave them some empowerment in order to raise their voices and say what exactly they want. And right now, again, women's role in this difficult times that a war is happening is very, very important. The caring they show for their families, for their friends, for people who might need help, they are basically in front lines as nurses, as doctors, as teachers, as mothers, and our sisters. So yeah, this is a little bit of a background. And I'm sure many of you are very well aware of. Now, my first question for our panel would be how they see this historical continuity of women's role and resistance in the context of Iran. How do you think this transfer had moved? And the main thing is that I want to see, like, from as people who live in a democratic country, how we see these women is very important. And I want you to tell us, how would you see them and how their role gives you the, the idea that what they want, and encourage you as a person living in a democratic country to speak up for these women. I don't want to put anyone on the corner by calling your name, so please, please go on. Any of you who would like to start, feel free to do so.
Perhaps if I could start, Rana. I am from a generation, a part of the country where we are really discovering women's ability to have a bigger voice and take on leadership roles. And so in a tiny way, I think that sense of women being more empowered and supported by other women is important here in Australia in our strong democracy. But the sense that I get from women who are protesting in ways like not covering in other ways is very inspiring, because the consequence for that is not just being uncomfortable in your society the way we might be here in Australia. It is dangerous. And I think for the other women in society, those small actions are actually huge. I can't begin to imagine what that's like. And so I'm keen that in Australia that we ensure that our democratic opportunities through Australia, through the UN, through other places, mean that those women are acknowledged and protected as best we can. And that I can only hope and pray that one day we return to a society that was as exciting and as progressive for women as it was prior to the IRGC regime change.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you. Gabriel, yeah.
Sure. Look, I would say, if I was to summarise my thoughts on the history of Iranian women's advocacy and activism, I'd summarise it in the word inspiring. So I'm aware that from the time of the Iranian Revolution, when the hijab laws came into place, of course, those laws were only really, the tip of the iceberg in terms of the repression of Iranian women. And I know that Iranian women almost immediately were out on the streets advocating for their rights. And that's something that's continued throughout the years. So Of course, the Women Life Freedom movement that happened in 2022 was something that was taken up around the world by both Iranian diaspora communities in places like Sydney and Melbourne, and here locally, but also just around the world, because I think it spoke so fundamentally to those basic freedoms. And the Iranian regime's approach to repressing women has been very much a case of policing women's bodies and seeing that as fundamental to the greater oppression of the regime. So I think looking at the immense bravery of Iranian women in taking to the streets in protest, but also as journalists or selling banned literature in Iran, or for Iranian women who have aspired to be judges, or Iranian women who have been involved in a political protest. I know that they've placed themselves at huge risk, and these are democratic rights and human rights that sometimes we take for granted in Australia. And so, I look at those examples and I take real inspiration from just how far people are willing to go to preserve and protect their democratic rights. And I'm very proud to be part of a government that's majority women and has the first majority cabinet. That means that we're better able to govern for women. And I'd hope that one day the Iranian people and Iranian women will be able to have the same freedoms.
Thank you so much. Lynda, yeah, please.
Rana, I'm really pleased that you started with history because, in this country, it's only been recently that we've acknowledged ancient history of our own country and recognised that Aboriginal Australians have been here for 65,000 years, and that the 250 odd years of white settlement were not the beginning of history in this country, as we were sort of taught when I went to school. And I think Jewish people and Iranian people, as well as so many other migrant communities in this country, we sort of recognise the longer sweep of history and see ourselves in that chain. And so for Jewish Australian women, it is a woman born in Persia in the 5th century BCE who inspires us, a Jewish woman who became queen. Her name was Esther, and she was one of the many wives of what we believe is Xerxes I. And in fact, she was responsible for advocating successfully for the saving of her people from the genocidal intent of one of his courtiers. And we literally a few days ago celebrated the festival of Purim to remember this historical action. We have a very, very long history entwined with the Iranian people, the Persian people, and today in Iran there are about 15,000 Jewish people living still. I have a family connection. My cousin Guy, who lives in Israel now, was born in Tehran in the 1970s, during the period under the Shah, as Senator McDonald refers to, when things were very, very different. And the connection and the relationship between the Jewish people and the state of Israel and Iran were very close. And my uncle Aviv was an engineer from Israel, and he lived there and was part of, the operation, the economy. And my cousin Bar was born. In fact, I made rice in the Iranian way because of what Iranian women taught my auntie Ricky. And so I think we are incredibly inspired not only by our own ancient Jewish Persian queen, Esther, but by the Iranian women of today. And that's why our relationship with Iranian women here in Australia is so strong. We remember our history. We are inspired by you every day.
Thank you so much, Lynda. I think that historical bond that you just explained is really important especially for people who are not from that part of the world, to understand, how that region used to work throughout history and what it has turned into right now, due to fundamentalism that exists at the moment. The next question I want to get into is the political aspects of women's rights, because many times that people talk about women's rights, especially if it is about women in the Middle East, they consider it as a social issue, cultural issue, and they never look at it as a political problem, as a political factor that needs to be taken into consideration. We have seen a lot that during the last 20 years, that when Western powers want to make a deal with the regime in Iran, they always talk about, military aspects of it and this kind of stuff. And human rights, and specifically women's rights, are never on the table. They never talk about it, I think mainly because they don't consider it as a political thing. I would like to know your opinion on that, and especially you, Gabriel, since the government has been supportive of Iranian women, and also you, Senator McDonald. I know the opposition have been very supportive as well. So how we can help this issue to be more in the political talking points, and how we can help Iranian women by making everyone understand that this issue is also a political issue. Gabriel, if you would like to start.
Sure, thank you, Rada. I'm very hesitant to jump in before anyone else, but no, I appreciate the opportunity to address this. So, as you say, the government has been consistent in standing with Iranian women. So, during 2022 and the Women Life Freedom movement, then Foreign Minister Penny Wong, who remains the Foreign Minister, was consistent in calling out the Iranian regime for its human rights abuses against Iranian women. I know that over 500 people were killed during those protests, and also consistent in standing with Iranian women. Now, as you say, sometimes women's issues are sidelined, both in terms of international politics, but sometimes also in terms of domestic politics, seen as more of a side issue. But we very much believe that women's issues are at the centre of governing. Of course, we're talking about over half the population here. So I think it's incredibly important here in Australia that we're always making sure that we're addressing women's issues, things like women's health. We've got a number of women's health initiatives, but also reducing the gender pay gap, which is also something we've been successful in. But in terms of the international issues, I think it's very important for us as members of parliament to ensure that we are calling out human rights abuses and women's rights abuses, making sure that we're keeping the focus on when these abuses are occurring. And the current protests, or I should say that the protests in Iran that have been happening this year, from the end of last year, and were so violently repressed by the regime, that's something that we've made sure that the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, and local representatives like myself and other parliamentarians like the member for Bennelong, Jerome Laxale, we've been consistently speaking about this both in the media and in Parliament and publicly, to make sure that the Iranian regime, the Islamic Republic in Iran regime, know that the world is watching on these issues, and that they are fundamental to governing to human rights, that women are afforded the freedoms and a say in the future of Iran that we would expect here in Australia.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Yeah, I think that's a very important point for all representatives to make sure that they bring it to the table, as a representative of people. Thank you. Senator McDonald, would you like?
Thank you. I support what Gabriel has just said there about Australia's role and how we can acknowledge and support the idea of women's rights as a political issue. I remain incredibly distressed that the Hamas invasion of Israel on the 7th of October, that attack, to my mind, was really focused at women. The raping, the murders, and of course in Iran you have had similar issues. And I'm so sorry to distress you and anybody else, but I feel as a woman the idea that our sex, our gender, is used as a way to frighten and terrify and humiliate women is without concept for me. And I think that the fact that as a world, for everybody who talks about women's rights, that the world was silent on that issue. The UN was silent on that issue. And now for some of the stories that you have told me for women and young girls in Iran, what is happening to them is inhuman, the way you would treat another human by attacking women when we are at our most vulnerable in that physicalness. So I think you are absolutely right that we need to think more about how we talk about women's rights, whether it be the right to vote, which is just such a very fundamental equalness, but certainly using women's bodies as a political weapon is shocking to me. And I wonder if that is something that, when we talk about violence in Australia at a very different level, but I think there are shared experiences that women have about walking, carrying keys in their hands, about not going into dark places at night without thinking, am I safe? I think these are things that very happily most men don't have to think about, but it is something that as women around the world, we think about our physical safety, and the idea that that can be weaponized to be a weapon of war, to terrorize and frighten women, I think is without conscience. It is why I appreciate so much the work of Oz Iran and you particular, Rana, of being able to tell me the human stories that are happening to your family, your friends, that allow me to really connect with why we should care about the conflict in Iran today. And that is not something I think that everybody in Australia might necessarily understand is why we should care. It's a very intellectual exercise to think about conflict in other people's countries, but I think this is something that as women I feel very connected to, and I'm grateful to you, the Iranian community, for being so generous with your words and your time to let me understand.
Thank you so much. And so you mentioned 7th of October, and yes, I think Lynda has. Would you like to talk about it, Lynda? And for me, it's very important what happens to Jewish women, because you could basically stood up and go above what has happened to you. And in Iran, what is happening right now is that the body of women had been the battlefield, for generations, for the last 47 years and 4 decades. And our bodies have been used, to make political statements, to enforce silence, everything, from the way that women are forced to cover themselves to the atrocities that happened and are happening right now in Iranian prisons. We have rape, we have torture, the atrocities are as Senator McDonald said, inhuman. So these are the same thing that happened on 7th of October to women as well. And Lynda, I would like to hear I think everyone would like to hear your notes on this as well.
Thanks, Rana, and thanks, Senator McDonald, for raising this issue and explaining, the relationship between things that might seem to be disparate, happening in different countries far away from Australia, but are not. And we talk a lot about, this sort of the globalized economy, the globalized world that we live in. But I don't know that we actually put that into front of mind when we're talking about these kinds of issues. I mean, that old phrase, the personal is political, and, what Hillary Clinton said so many years ago at the UN, that rights are human rights. You know, those things that sound like platitudes today, but as you both say, women's bodies still have always been tools, political tools, and the impact of that on us personally is profound, but also on our political discourse is underestimated. I think that we can't separate what happens to women in a society from what is happening in that society. And the way a society treats women is always, you know, the way society treats its most marginalised members is the sign of the health of that society. And when half of a society is, as you say, Rana, not only second-class citizens but abused citizens, that tells us that that society is evil, and that what is happening cannot be ignored and put into any other kind of context. You know, today there's so much about understand things in context. Well, the context here is an oppressive, misogynistic, tyrannical regime, an Islamic fundamentalist regime that seeks to impose its worldview on all the citizens of that region and by extension on citizens of the world. And we have seen the ideology play out when young girls in Britain have been raped, again, subscribing to similar ideology. We've seen sex slaves of ISIS. We've seen, I mean, even, you know, you referred Senator McDonald to Gaza and Hamas, and, you know, the story of one of the women taken, an Yazidi woman taken during the ISIS revolution as a sex slave, was liberated from Gaza by the IDF not so long ago. And, you know, to not see these things as interconnected is just folly. And so any feminists anywhere in the world who don't recognise that what is happening in Iran is an international issue, it's a political issue in our own societies, if we appease regimes like the IRGC issue, then we are basically damning the women of the world to medieval, you know, kind of conditions. And I think that political correctness in the West has prevented many Western feminists from actually calibrating their moral compasses correctly. We have not seen white Western feminists in the main speaking out against what is happening to Iranian women. And that is because perhaps they are unwilling to break the sort of black and white kind of paradigm of if something is done by a Western white man or regime, then one can condemn it. But if it is not done by the traditional acceptable enemy, then one has to keep quiet. And I think that's why we didn't see people speaking out about the foul sexual violence of October 7 and beyond. It is why we see the disgraceful silence of so many white women warriors about Iranian women. And it is actually not only a disgrace, it is an outrage. And really pleased actually to hear Jerome Lassalle, as you say, Gabriel, who happens to be my local member, speak out on these issues. It is so important to hear both sides of politics in this country, and certainly male politicians speaking out, where we should all, in fact, be speaking out.
Thank you so much, Lynda. Yes, I think you mentioned a very important point about male support and men who need to speak up as well as women. Yeah, I think Gabriel mentioned something in lines with those as well. Gabriel, you said that you are the only male here on the panel, but it was a deliberate decision to make sure that there is men's voice here as well, because you need to be allies you are our allies, women's allies, and specifically for men who are in politics, I think it's very important to raise your voice. How do you see that is happening, in the parliaments and in the government right now? The allyship, basically.
Well, look, I certainly recognise that it's important to be allies. We don't always want the burden of having to speak up about these issues, about issues that women are facing in terms of discrimination or in terms of sexual violence, to fall on women, and that's the case, I think, with a lot of other groups that face discrimination. So whether or not it's First Nations people or people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, I think allyship is incredibly important, because the burden falling always on that minority group to have to fly the flag for the particular issues they face can be incredibly heavy. But at the same time, I'm very conscious that, as a man, I don't want to take up too much space when, for too much of history and still today, there is often too much of men taking up space. In terms of the role that we can play, I think, in Parliament and in government, as I said, I think it is really important that local representatives and the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister down continue to speak up to raise awareness of these issues and to make sure that on a broader international level the spotlight is staying on these issues. I would like to acknowledge as well we condemn the horrific October 7th attacks by Hamas and the sexual violence that occurred there. And I think, as Lynda said as well, so much in terms of conflicts, women are often face some of the worst consequences of conflicts that happen internationally, and we see that in Iran, sadly, as well. This is very much something that we stand against as a government and as a country, and I think that's a bipartisan position.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Senator McDonald, are the men allies at the Parliament?
Look, I think it is very different for men, and I think Lynda made a really, really important point about when we think it's okay to talk about violence against women. In Australia, we have a scourge of domestic violence here currently, and it is very okay to talk about that. We have men right across Australia who are standing with women to say this isn't good enough and that we must change. And I think that value of protecting women in our society is one that it's okay to cross cultural borders and to say that still stands. That value is still important. That it is still that we must fight for that. It doesn't matter whether it is in Iran or whatever country around the world, or even within our cultures here in Australia, that there is a commonality of us believing that women's rights are their bodies, their ability to think, their ability to vote, their ability to be part of society in an equal way is a sacrosanct thing. And so when we talk about men's roles in that, I think in some ways it's actually more important than women's roles, because as women, we know this. This is not a new thing, but it is men who make the change. And so it is really terrific to have Gabriel on this morning. And I acknowledge that he's saying you don't want to take too much space, Gabriel. Feel free to take lots of space, because I think that this is men's roles in this discussion, and I encourage it. And in fact, I would love to see more men the way in my family, they've been such great support and encouragement for women's rights here in Australia. But how do we do that in other countries as well?
Thank you so much, Senator McDonald. I agree with all the points. And from here, I want to get to how our community here can help. in a situation like Iran, where there has been a mass uprising since January. A massacre of people happened. People are still looking for the body of their loved ones. I still have my own former student looking for her 16-year-old son since early January, and there is no responses, nothing. And this mother, she has been checking morgues, hospitals, anywhere that was possible, and there was no answer. And now that the war is happening, we have heard news about destructions of places that the bodies have been, kept by the regime themselves. And this is scaring off people. It's the huge atrocities that is happening right now under the cover of war is actually another thing that we need to consider. But with all of this that is happening, I would like to hear from you that how we can help as an Iranian Australian community, as members of the diaspora here, with our loved ones, with our family members and friends in Iran, being threatened, being surveilled, trying to keep safe under the bombings, and all that is happening at the same time. And also there are other communities. We have other communities here. For example, the Jewish community here, they have also been very supportive for the Iranian people as well. So what is the role of these communities, other communities, diaspora communities who want to move forward and, to support Iranian women? Because I think at the moment, it's a moral responsibility. It's not anymore the question of, should we say something, should we not say something? I think right now it has turned into an ethical stance that every one of us need to take. And I'm so glad seeing the stance of the Australian government, the Australian opposition, and all the politicians who have been together, united in one voice, supportive of Iranian people. I would go first to Lynda. We've worked together, Lynda, on different issues, and I know that your community is very supportive of specifically Iranian women and their rights and what is happening to them. So what do you think? Can you please explain the role of your community a little bit more and how you try to help and engage with Iranian Australians? Thank you.
Yes, I might just correct one little thing that you said there, Rana. Not all politicians have been supportive, and I would point to the Greens, who have absolutely stayed silent on this issue, and that is a disgrace. And my friend Tina Khodrostami, an Iranian local government councillor here in New South Wales, was actually one of the first people I reached out to. It was after the August March for Humanity across the Sydney Harbour Bridge, when she came out in the media as an Iranian Australian woman who had been part of the Greens and had for 2 years been advocating for them not to stand with the regime, which was murdering her family. And still, there were her people marching under the portrait of the Ayatollah, and she said, enough. I cannot remain part of, a political party which is blind to morality in this particular situation. And I think, so I might just go a bit broad and then go more narrowly to your question about how we have and continue to support the Iranian community. I think one of the things that the Jewish community has is a long historical memory. And they say that, part of our role in the world is to shine a light. And we shine a light on the patterns of history that we see repeating. And we see, since 1979, a regime in power which has brought back some of the worst excesses of human history. Slavery is now back in Yemen as a modern phenomenon, Iran funds and trains and supports the Yemen regime, all the regimes of the Middle East, which are the ones oppressing women, all of the proxy armies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, etc. And I think the first thing the Jewish community can do is continue to shine a light on the broader historical context of what is happening and remind the world of what happens when we allow tyrannical regimes like this to go scot-free, when we appease them, when we do not take seriously the abuses that they carry out against their own people and, of course, by extension, against the rest of us who also wish to see liberal democracy flourish. I think it's important for us to recognize and say loudly and frequently that Iranian interference, foreign interference in the affairs of foreign countries, including Australia, must be recognized, must be stopped. Not only Iranian interference, for example, in funding terror against our Jewish community and the wider Australian community, but also Iranian, Russian, Chinese interference in the disinformation being pumped into our society, into our phones, into our schools, into our universities, the funding of academia, the funding of literary festivals. All of that interference by a horrific regime is something Australians need to wake up to. And so we in the Jewish community have made it our business to keep repeating this message. Maybe now, perhaps after Bondi, the message is being heard by Australia, but we will not stop broadcasting that message. In terms of the community-to-community support, as you know, Rana, we have, for the longest time, continued to keep our arms open, our ears open, and our hearts open to Iranian people, the Iranian community. We stand with you at your demonstrations in all the cities of Australia. It is, of course, noteworthy that those demonstrations, the Women Life Freedom demonstrations, which seem to have evaporated in this country, but the pro-freedom demonstrations around the country do not require police presence because there are not violent agitators working against our society at those demonstrations. The last one I attended in Hyde Park in Sydney, there were flowers being handed to the police who had nothing to do because there was peace at those demonstrations. And standing with you physically, standing with you emotionally. Our International Women's Day events in Sydney and Melbourne for National Council of Jewish Women this year featured Iranian women as well, not only on the panels but in the rooms. And we want to create a safe space for you because you don't have safe spaces in your country at this time. And we also understand what it is to be a community whose fundamental issues are not understood by the wider community, are corrupted, are twisted, and we think it's tremendously important to wrap our arms around you the way so many wrapped their arms around us over the past 2.5 years. So I want to thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynda. Really appreciate your words. And I think it's very important what you said, that we need to keep our ears open. What really disappointed me with the Green Party's statement, and I wrote about it myself on the Sky web page, an article about that. They did not talk to us. There's a huge Iranian Australian community here, and I think any party, when they want to talk about our families, our friends, what is happening to them, the first thing they need to do is to keep their ears open and listen to us first before making their decisions based on their political move and agenda. Thank you so much. Senator McDonald, would you like to add something?
Thank you very much. I want to start where Lynda started. I do think this influence that has been happening in Australia, whether it be funding for extremist groups that have been gathering in Australia, I was delighted to see the expulsion of the Iranian ambassador following the outrageous actions that he had been directing. But the influence and the funding that has crept into the Australian conversation has been concerning. And I think as a nation, I hope the government is willing to look at following the money. I'm an accountant by trade, always follow the money, but following the money for who is funding these groups, who is funding this influence, who is allowing this bizarre agenda to have arisen. And like others on the panel, I was absolutely horrified to see some of those marches displaying terrorist group flags, pictures of the Ayatollah. I was shocked that in Australia that young people would think, with such a complete lack of understanding of world affairs, would think that this was actually something that Australia should support. As far as what we can do, I think what you are doing, Rana, has been wonderful. You know, I first met you after hearing you speak on Radio National, and reached out to you. As I said, you've been generous with your time, and so it's allowed me to become more involved with doing what I can to support particularly Iranians who have fled that regime and come to Australia. I had already been trying to do everything I can, along with my coalition colleagues, to support Israeli members here in Australia. We don't have a huge community of either Israeli or Iranian refugees in the north, but certainly we should be doing our best there and to spread our influence further. So I think what you're doing on a human level, on a person-to-person, on a leader level, is incredibly important. That changes how people speak in the parliament on the front line of communicating with Australians. So thank you for that. I have been disappointed in the parliament that there has been this sense of equivalency, that we couldn't talk about what had happened on the 7th of October or the attacks on Israel without saying, oh, but there's other bad stuff happening too. And I'm conscious of that with Iran, that we don't for a second allow a sense of equivalency to arise where we don't remember every day at the beginning of every conversation about it, that Iranian people, particularly Iranian women, have had their right to live a free and unfettered and joyous life has been removed by a regime that I abhor everything they stand for in every way. That human-to-human conversation that allows real people to understand why they should care, not on an intellectual level, but in their hearts and in their guts, I think is what drives humans, rightly or wrongly. That's how we are. And so I thank you for the work that you have done, and a broad part of the Iranian community in coming forward when we had bipartisan support to list the IRGC as a state-sponsored terrorist organisation. Those hearings I thought were incredibly brave for how many Iranian people came forward to speak on that committee, knowing the influence that is already in Australia, and that you were, by being public in your comments, that you were making yourselves, you're making yourselves public in that. So I congratulate you and applaud you for bravery and for continuing to lead the fight with everyday Australians who don't know why they should care about what's happening in Iran right now.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you. Our community is really brave. I'm really proud of every single one of them who came forward and talked about it. Many of us have had, since those public toppings and submissions, have had our families threatened inside Iran, asking them to, the regime called them, asked them to talk to us and make sure we stop speaking out. And that they don't like it. We had our community members here had been threatened with their addresses, their phone numbers have been published on public websites, and they've asked IRGC affiliated people in every country, you need to go and make sure these people never talk loud. And yeah, so everything is really brave. Our community is really brave, and we are all very proud of each other. So now I want to move to Gabriel. If you can please speak to us and let us know what else can we do, in order to make sure that the support continues for Iranian women inside Iran and also Iranian women here in Australia. Many of us don't feel safe even in Australia. There have been cases of harassment, intimidation that has happened. Yeah, they all have been reported, but still the concerns continue. So if you can just let us know what else our community can do, so we can all do better here in Australia at least, and support our mothers and sisters in Iran.
Well, firstly, I'd just second what Senator McDonald has said about what an amazing job Iran and other community organisations, for me locally, that's places like House of Persia and Australian Iranian Society of Victoria, and a lot of other organisations that I've engaged with. What an amazing job a lot of the community organisations have been doing in ensuring that the Australian people better understand the Islamic Republic of Iran's regime and what the Iranian people and Iranian women are going through. And I'd extend that to the broader Iranian community. So I know how much solidarity and how much advocacy there is amongst the wider Iranian Australian community in ensuring that we as parliamentarians understand and the wider public understands, but also showing that moral support for people, family, loved ones, but also their compatriots back in Iran. And I hope that support is felt, and I'm sure it's felt by the Iranian people who are living under the regime. In terms of what further could be done, I mean, I think please continue what you have been doing in terms of advocating to us as parliamentarians, in terms of informing the public. It is. I'm very grateful for all the community members that I've been in contact with who have helped me to understand and have been so generous with their time in assisting me to grapple with the complexities of some of these issues. But we're absolutely committed to continuing to stand with the Iranian people as a government. As has been referred to, we expelled the Iranian ambassador for being involved in those attacks against our Australian Jewish community. The first time that an ambassador has been expelled from Australia since World War II. And we've also passed legislation to list the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a state sponsor of terrorism. Now, I've also had community members contact me with concerns for their safety and security, and that's something we take really seriously. That's something that I have passed on information wherever possible to the relevant ministers. I'd encourage the community to continue to both make reports to the police in instances of immediate harm, but also to the Home Affairs National Security Hotline. So the number for that is 1-800-123-400. And we do rely on community members to be able to pass on information which we otherwise may not come across. So we're very grateful and appreciate that. It can be often tiring, and we can't always provide updates about what's been done with that information. But please be assured that our government and the intelligence agencies take that information really seriously, and we want to ensure that the IRGC aren't having any influence here. Of course, they're a listed organisation now, and so we want to make sure that we're stopping any further violence or any further attacks that they may coordinate here. But also we want to ensure that the Iranian Australian community feel safe here, and that we continue to stand with you, both in terms of the international movement, but here locally.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. I will get back to you again a bit later with a question that I've been receiving from last night about our the girls' football team here. But I just want to mention to everyone, if you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A question. I know Senator McDonald needs to leave very soon. She has a flight. So if you have any question from Senator McDonald, please be quick. I'd read a question here from Förste, asking, is there any support to, okay, I feel many people in West don't fully know what ordinary Iranians been through. Is there any support to raise awareness? I have been thinking a lot about heroes that killed since January 2026 and created some paintings for their memories. Is there any support to show these stories to local communities? There is no official grieving for Iranians and no pause for our pain. Yeah, I think that has been a question that I received a lot. Like people are, yeah, we have many artists here. We have many community members who would like to, to do something in order to raise awareness, that human to human aspect. And I think art is a very important tool. I know the Jewish community has used art a lot in their fights. So maybe Lynda, can you tell us a bit of some examples, and then maybe we get back to see what kind of support is available to our community here.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the Goldstone Gallery in Melbourne, which was founded by Nina Sanadze, who is a Jewish artist who was doxed. We talk about people not being safe, not in Australia either. After October 7, Jewish women who spoke up about what was happening to Jewish women in Israel, their own feelings. As you know, a huge number of Australian creatives and academics in particular were doxed. Nina was one of those people. Her gallery platforms art about these issues, and I know that she is open to speaking to Iranian women about mounting some art projects as well, and I'm happy, Rana, through you to connect people. I think also we have tried, National Council of Jewish Women has tried to platform the voices of Iranian women. We've in fact got a panel discussion coming up on March 24, which I'll also give you details of to publicise, where we have 4 Iranian women speaking about what has happened to them, their families, and so on. We've also had Jewish Iranian Australian women for a number of years now who have been too afraid to speak up because of what might happen to their families in Iran. We know, as I said before, there are still about 15,000 Jewish people living in Iran. 13, I know, have been executed since 1979 on all kinds of trumped up charges. There are, I think, another 13 right now in Iranian prisons being held. There have been other executions. So Jewish Iranian Australian women have been afraid to speak out, but I think now there is at least a window for people to listen. So I'd encourage people to come to that webinar as well. And yeah, art and every other form of expression is important. And there are so many Iranian Australian women writing in media. I'm thinking of some amazing women, journalists, academics, Dr. Saba Vasefi. There are a couple of women writing in the Australian now, and it's so important for those voices to be heard in whatever sectors we can make them heard.
Thank you so much. Susan McDonald.
Thank you. Because I do have to go very quickly, thank you for your understanding. It's a couple of flights to get to Canberra today. This is a hard one. I do really look to our national broadcasters. I've been disappointed with how the ABC has been reporting or giving space on this topic and giving it in a way that allows ordinary Australians to connect with the issues, particularly for Iranian women, but Iran more broadly. And that's something that I've just been reminded I need to do more on, contacting those journalists and the executive of that organisation to say, do we feel that we've really been given a real opportunity for Australians to understand what's happening and why they should care? It is, I think, as far as parliamentarians are going, I think the work that Iran, the Jewish community, has done has been incredibly important to me. And you have changed my outlook and my life by your giving me awareness, and I'm very grateful for that. So perhaps just more of what you've been doing. Thank you and well done. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be on today. I wish everybody a very happy International Women's Day, but particularly to all the women of the Iranian community, both here and in Iran. And I hope you have a very blessed Sunday.
Thank you so much, Senator McDonald. I really appreciate you making this time for us and being here with us today, and happy International Women's Day to you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
So Gabriel, can you please let us know, what is available to our community in terms of raising awareness and making that human-to-human connection more bold?
Well, I certainly understand the importance of art in raising awareness and what an important role it's played both in advocacy for women's issues, both in Iran and in the wider movement. I did attend one of the protests against the Islamic Republic in Iran regime on the steps of State Parliament. It wasn't there when I was there, but I know that there has been a large banner that's been made with a lot of the people that have been murdered by the Islamic Republic in the protests that have been taking place this year. So I think that is one, I suppose, very visible example of where art has been used to be able to recognise and commemorate those who have been killed. I think in terms of broader supports, especially for people, if you were in my electorate, I'd welcome you to get in touch and we can see if we can find a space or an appropriate way that might be communicated to our local community. And I'd encourage any people who had art ideas to get in touch with their local member. I think often the galleries at the local councils or even the community-run galleries may be open to displaying those kinds of pieces to help raise awareness, and that's certainly something that I'd be happy to look into facilitating. And then again, I think for larger projects or larger ideas, again, happy to look into what kind of federal government supports might be there to support the artists and their work reach a wider audience.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. First, John, feel free to write to Iran as well if you need any support and help. We can connect you to people. So now the other question that I have been receiving the last couple of days, Gabriel, this is specifically for you, is the case of the Iranian national football team, the girls who have been in Australia. And according to some reports, they are being surveilled and disconnected from everything and everyone in their hotel right now in Gold Coast. They have their last game tonight. So what happened, I say a little bit to the audience, the girls decided not to sing the regime's anthem during their first game. And then they got threatened with their lives on the state TV in Iran. Their families received phone calls and threats, and the girls directly received phone calls and threats as well. And the Australian Iranian community members have been trying to connect with these girls, to contact them, talk to them, see, just to give them chocolates or flowers or to offer support and love, but no one had been able to contact them. There have been even Iranian Australian families kicked out of the hotel in the lobby only because they were speaking in Persian, or they were wearing a specific T-shirt with the logo of lion and sun on them. This is very distressing to our community. There was a petition up that gained over 40,000 signatures in less than 48 hours. There is a letter. I just sent it out today, this morning, to Minister Tony Burke and other senators and politicians and also media. It was signed by 13 organizations and NGOs, all registered, and charities in Iran. And so our community is really concerned about the situation of these girls. And yeah, if you can let us know what is being done, if anything is being done, what can we do here, and how we can make sure the girls are safe, because apart from those threats, there's also war happening in Iran right now. So considering the war and the bombings, it's not safe to travel to Iran at this point of time.
I'll say from the outset that I'm limited in what I can say in my comments. Of course, I'm aware of the situation and have been following it closely, and the relevant ministers are aware of the situation as well. We know that the Islamic Republic regime have been able to threaten people here and have also threatened the families of people that flee. Of course, we stand with the Iranian people, and we want all Iranian people to be, safe and have their freedom. But unfortunately, and I understand the community's concern about this, but I'm very limited in what I can say about that. Yeah, as I say, it's something that we're very much aware of.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabriel. I understand that, you are limited in what you can say, but we're hoping that you're looking into very seriously, because our concerns for their lives is really serious. I have another question here.
I just want to reassure you that I hear you, and I've also spoken with people who've raised the issue. Thank you for sharing that.
No worries. Thank you, Gabriel. There's another question here from Julie. Thank you so much to our panel for such an informative, respectful discussion. As a non-Jewish, non-Iranian Australian, it gives me so much hope to hear this mutual support. My question, what is your view of the role of the Australian mainstream media in terms of building a better understanding of the issues for Iranian and Jewish women, and the way women's bodies have been a battleground under violence from Islamist extremists? Lynda, would you like to talk to this one? You're mute.
Yes, I think that the voices of non-Iranian, non-Jewish women are really important, and not only so that Iranian women understand that they are supported, but also so that media who rely on traffic to keep themselves going, really, understand that this is a story that mainstream Australians want to hear. And so I think reaching out to media, we've all got the ability to write to the editor of a newspaper, to write to an opinion editor, to write an opinion piece. If you have a voice, either as a person with a platform and a title, or an ordinary person, an ordinary Australian woman, saying, as an ordinary Australian woman, I want to know more about this. I care about this issue. This is why it's important to me. So either writing yourself or writing to Australian media and saying, this is something that we want more of. I think it was so disappointing to see how little the latest round of uprising in Iran was covered in the Australian media. I mean, we in the Jewish community were watching so closely, and we also read, Jewish media from around the world, and it was top billing in our stories because we recognize how important this revolution is. But to see how little it was covered in the Australian media at the beginning was shocking. And now, you know, war, they say if it bleeds, it leads. Therefore, the war is, you know, top headlines in our media. So let's capitalize on that while the story is hot in our media. Let's just get more stories in there about the women's issue, specifically about the revolution itself, about the uprising. I think now is the time.
Thank you so much, Lynda. I'll just read an anonymous comment here. I have full sympathy and concern for the plight of Iranian women. However, the concern for Iranian women contrasts with the worldwide treatment handed out to Israeli Jewish women attacked, kidnapped, raped, killed by Hamas, which is a proxy of Iran. Yes, for the audience, Hamas and Hezbollah, both of them are proxies of the regime in Iran. Iranian people have been always against this fundamentalism and how their resources, their money, and their wealth is being abused and stolen from them and given to these fundamentalist groups in order to spread terror and chaos around the world, not only in Iran. There is a nice comment here. I would like to read again from first. You should see the courage of Iranian mother, how they dance and wear white while carrying the unbearable pain of losing their kids. Imagine how hurtful it is for Iranians to hear the possibility of mourning for the Ayatollah who killed the young generation in Iran. Yes, that idea has been also communicated to the government and other parties in Australia. Lynda, please. Yes.
I'd like to pick up on that idea of the wearing of the white and the bravery of the Iranian women. After the Bondi Hanukkah terror attack, our organization ran a webinar. We ran a vigil for women. It was a women's vigil after Bondi, and women from across the Australian community came from all walks of life, all political parties, all ethnic backgrounds, and there were many, many Iranian women standing with us that day. And in fact, it was an Iranian friend of mine who said we should wear white to that vigil because white is the opposite color of the ISIS flag, which the terrorists, the shooters used. White is the symbol of courage for Iranian women. And so that is what we did. And the sea of women in white at Bondi was just incredible. And I want to pay tribute to that Iranian ally who gave us that idea.
Thank you so much, Lynda. Yes, I saw the videos and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And yeah, I saw the video of Iranian mothers. It's painful to watch. But I think the message, we need to focus on the message that they were trying to send, wearing white and dancing on the graves of their teenagers or their parents or their grandparents. The message they are trying to send is that they are fed up with this regime, they are done with this regime, and they won't let these atrocities to freeze them in mourning and in sadness. They stood up, they are standing up, and they will not sit down until this regime is gone. So that is the message that this dancing on the grave would send out. And this is a very, very ancient and historical kind of cultural aspect of our culture as well. That when pain gets too much and unbearable and we don't want to deal with it anymore, we start dancing. And that dance is dancing in defiance and in resistance. So yeah, I just wanted to repeat the messages and the reason behind this dancing. That gives us a lot of hope, a lot of courage here. It empowers even us here in Australia to keep what we are doing and to speak up and raise the voice of Iranian women here in Australia to make sure that we do whatever we can to support them at these difficult times that they are struggling for freedom and liberty and human rights right now. There are no more questions and we are getting to the end of the time. So if any of you would like to add final words here, please feel free to do so. And the audience, please feel free to contact Auziran if you need any help, you need any more information, any more details, you want to understand more, you want to talk to us, yeah, please feel free to get in touch.
Well, I'd like to go first because I think we should leave the man to have the last word on this upside down day. It's International Women's Day. Usually women have the last word, but today you should have the last word, Gabriel. So what I'd like to say is pick up on what you said about dancing, Rana. I think that's something that we have in common. When our enemies worship death, we worship life, and we must continue to live, to dance, and to look forward. That is what our job is as Jewish women, Iranian women standing together. We must continue to raise our voices to both educate and alert the Australian community as to what is happening here, what is the broader context, what are the implications for Australia and for all people who believe that women's rights are human rights. We will continue to do that. We will continue to stand with you. And thank you very much for inviting me on to the panel today.
Thank you for being here in your time off. Yes, I hope you enjoy the weather where you are. Thank you so much, Lynda, for giving us your time. Gabriel.
Well, thank you, Rana. And first, I'd like to thank you and Auziran for providing the opportunity for me to be able to convey some information on behalf of the government, but also to hear from you and to hear from the people who contributed with those questions and from the other panelists as well. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I'd like to reiterate again that for the Iranian Australian community and especially locally in my electorate, I'd encourage you to continue to keep in touch with us and continue advocating for your community, as I know you have been doing at such a difficult time. I mean, I know how concerned a lot of the community members are for their family and loved ones, you know, with the current conflict, with the current war, but also with everything that's been going on since the start of the year and for the past 12 months as well. And so having the energy to be able to do that, but also continue to go about your business and you know, support your families and do everything, must be an incredible burden. So I'm also very grateful for everyone who's taken the time to contact me and to contact other members of the government and the parliament as well. I recognise that Iranian women have always been at the forefront of political activism in Iran to progress women's rights and human rights. And we want to make sure that Iranian women and Iranian Australian women have a seat at the table and have a voice both in Iran and a say in the future, but also here in Australia. So you know, thank you so much for today's event again and for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Gabriel, for being here and representing the government. Really grateful for your points and your help as well. Thank you again, Lynda. So there are no more questions. Many thanks to all participants. A trying time for Iranian people, also Israelis and Americans. May the regime be changed for the better. So yeah, I salute all Iranian women here. Happy International Women's Day to everyone, and thank you for being with us today. Let's hope this regime goes as soon as possible and we see peace and freedom across Middle East and a better world for all of us. Thank you so much for everyone.
Thank you, Rana. Happy International Women's Day all.
Thank you.